Welcome back. And welcome back to you.
Thank you.
And we were talking about the different relationships that can form in and outside of group, which reminds us of that last part of our graphic, which was the corrective recapitulation of the primary family group, which is quite a sentence. And so I thought maybe you could help us understand what happens with that.
Sure. When we're young is really the time our minds are most impressionable. And by watching our family and seeing how we're related to, particularly people who have a lot of meaning to us, who we would really want us to love us, like our parents, we get a sense of what other people are like and how we think other people will relate to us, and also whether we're worthwhile. Because a child will kind of look to the parents' eyes to see, am I worthwhile or not worthwhile? And we get a sense also whether relationships are stable, whether we can express our feelings or not express our feelings safely, whether people will be consistent with us or not. And all that has a very profound impact, you know. It's things that are consistent that give us, it's like if a child reaches for a mobile, right?
Right.
The child learns that its hand can reach for the mobile and gets the idea, oh, my hand can do this, right? So the stability in the family really determines how stable one's own sense of self or other people are.
Okay.
Okay, and in a group, we take that map that was established as a child and what relationships are like, what men are like, what women are like, what I am like, into the group. We don't come anywhere in any situation in a blank.
Okay.
A group really, the term for a group has been termed the microcosm of the real world. We repeat the relationships and all our expectations of ourselves, of the people and relationships in a group. And in that sense, it repeats the early family.
So in a lot of ways, it sounds like we come into that group process with a filter. And the filter is developed for us very early in life. And in some ways, we may even seek out experiences that sort of validate our filter. But the group, because, you know, we're talking about the mobile, the family may be unstable, but what you offer with a group is a stable experience.
Correct.
So I don't have to worry about that it's going to shift every time I walk in. So I won't need the same survival skills, maybe, that I needed when my family moved around all the time.
Right. And with that stable environment of a group, one can get a much more stable sense of who they are.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm not having to be defensive all the time and protect myself from whatever I had to protect myself from earlier.
And we can also figure out then what's coming from me and what's coming from other people.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Is that hard for people to, because those filters, in my experience as a therapist, I mean, those filters are pretty solid. I mean, I don't know it's a filter. I think it's the way the world is. I think it's the way people are.
Yes, they're very solid because they're motivated by fear. Fear is an important factor in really all therapy and in group psychotherapy too. You know, the fear keeps the filter in place because, like we talked a little earlier, it's the best way I learned to deal with things that might frighten me. If I'm afraid of being rejected, a person who's afraid of being rejected may learn, don't show too much need of another person, you know. Don't say you might really want to be with somebody.
Okay.
And that's maintained by fear. But when the group is consistent and safe, a person can experiment with doing it a little differently. And then they can say, you know, I'm impacting this person by saying, let's say, I like them in a very different way. And it seems to be working over and over again. So maybe it isn't quite me that's sort of causing people to reject me in the sense that I'm not worthy somehow.
Right. Yeah, I can begin to separate maybe behaviors I do from my value as a person.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Well, and that
or
part
have done.
Or have done in the past. Yeah. Well, and part of that is you can't do something different until you have new information.
Right.
So it sounds like part of what's corrective about this, in that phrase, corrective, is that, you know, what worked in my little family is not exactly the way the world has to be.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
You know, again, we tend to repeat things almost in our own darkness. You know, we think that I'll be looked at, if I ask for something, people will think I'm greedy.
Right.
You know, or if I want something, it means I can't also love somebody at the same time. But in the group, it gets a chance to be exposed to the light, in
Okay.
a sense.
Yeah, and again, we get to see how human and how absolutely part of the human condition our behavior is.
Yes.
Let's take a look at the next set of factors that seem to be helpful for
Okay.
group therapy. Let's see, we have the testing of interpersonal reality, the development of socializing techniques, catharsis of painful memories, a sense of belonging and acceptance, the imparting of information, and altruism. Okay, so if we go back, and it sounds like testing of interpersonal reality is what we've been talking
Yeah,
about, which
very
is,
much
I
so.
think this is the way relationships work, but I get to maybe get some new information.
Right, exactly. Both by feedback and watching other people.
Okay, now how long, in your experience, does a group need to be together before they start actually telling the truth about those sort of things? Because my experience is that when a group forms, any kind of group, whether it's in a work condition or social condition, at first we've kind of got that polite, nicey nice stuff we do,
Yeah,
right? Because, and that's again fear-based. I
Right.
don't want to say something, it's going to make you dislike me. So what happens to make that shift, or people are willing to risk giving
Right.
honest feedback?
that will vary because that happens very sort of almost organically depending on the individuals in the group. Different individuals will have different fears and
Okay.
have different fears of different situations. So it will depend on the particular individuals and the composition of the individuals in the group. But people are being honest all along and struggling to be honest all along in a group. You know, we're never completely honest. But as a group goes on, we get sort of progressively more honest and really at a very organic pace, you know, a pace that feels safe to us. If we get honest sort of too fast, it's too frightening.
Yeah.
And if we don't get honest at all, we get frustrated with ourselves.
Yeah.
So ideally, and typically, it happens kind of at somewhere in between a very dramatic pace that would be too fast and really wouldn't mean anything, in the sense that we really wouldn't understand why I was afraid to be more honest.
Right. Yeah, so that's part of it. It isn't just changing the behavior, but from your point of view, it's really, seeing where this behavior is coming from
Right, and changing the fear.
and changing the fear that underlies it.
Right.
Okay. And so in terms of the development of socializing techniques, it sounds like people actually get a chance to practice real life communication skills.
Right. You know, someone who may be afraid of the opposite gender gets a chance to talk to people in the opposite gender and gets a chance to do so in an intimate way where they're very honest. And so there's that practice, and then it can be taken outside for them.
Well, and what's nice about that container, too, is that even though sexuality issues can come up, there's like this boundary around that.
Right.
So it sort of provides a relief of pressure for people that out there in the dating world or out there in a relationship, things sometimes can be clouded by your physical expectations of me. But if I know there's a line, I would guess that really frees people to experiment with things.
Right. And that's exactly right. And to understand the meaning sometimes of aspects of sexuality. Sexuality is a very complex thing. It has to do with, am I lovable? Can I prove myself? Can I have an effect on people? All those things. And by just talking about them without having to feel like I'm going to prove myself and the person may not talk to me back or not talk to me back, or they may reject me or whatever, I could really begin to see what the issues in sexuality, if I have some, not every group member may have
Sure.
some, but I think all people probably have some, are for me. Do I think I'm unattractive? Do I think I'm too aggressive and I put people off? Am I not manly or womanly enough, or whatever it is? It can become much clearer, my perception versus what other people may really be thinking.
And then getting an understanding of the filter that clouds my perception.
Right.
Now, this word, we have a new vocabulary word here, catharsis of painful memories.
I don't know what that means.
I bet you do. What is catharsis of painful memory?
Catharsis of painful memories is really, it's a very old term. In fact, it goes all the way back to Freud. But all it really means is getting out painful feelings. That in itself, it's been known for a long time, is really not enough. It's not just expressing emotion. It's understanding the emotion that's expressed and being able to take that understanding with one into the world. What the catharsis really does in a group is it binds people. You know, if let's say I was starting to cry, you would probably go, oh, you know,
Right.
you would be drawn closer to me. So as people get more able to express their emotions in a group in an honest way, it tends to bind the group together.
Okay, so it becomes, even though our worst fear, I think a lot of times is if I show strong emotion, then people will leave me. What they find in a group situation is the opposite, which in
Right.
fact, people actually draw closer to me.
Right. Another analogy that I'm thinking of as you're saying that is a couple. I don't think it's a healthy thing necessarily in a couple, but many couples will have this pattern where they'll be, you know, just pouting. And then they'll get mad at each other. And the madness is drawing them further apart. But after they're mad at each other, they'll find themselves even closer together.
Okay.
You know, that's not necessarily the best way, I think, to do it, but you can see there how the emotion can actually draw people closer together.
And sort of reinforce that powerful expression.
Right.
Now, and I would think the only risk of that is, you know, for the person that's the only way they've ever been able to draw people close together, maybe they'd learn the opposite, which is instead
Right.
of living in your feelings all the time, maybe it's
Right.
okay to actually trust your intellect and communicate.
Right.
And I'm thinking about people who
That's an
cry in every
excellent point.
situation.
Right,
You know?
that's an excellent point, right. And what you also learn to group is besides being honest about one's own emotions, you also learn to tolerate your emotions.
Huh.
What creates a lot of difficulties in relationships is really the belief that isn't necessarily true that I can't tolerate my emotions.
Yeah.
So for example, a person in a group may have the fear that I can't tolerate being abandoned, and he or she might try to control everyone they ever come into relationship with
Exactly.
to give them constant reassurance they're not leaving, and in fact drive the person away in doing so.
Exactly. Sort of
Yeah.
becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, which
Correct.
in a group situation, you'd have people be able to tell you that, which is, when you do this, it makes me want to create distance with you. We're going to need to close. I see we're getting to the high sign, which is too bad. I have more that I'd love to talk to you about, but thank you for joining us. I
You're
appreciate
very
it.
welcome. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for coming. Tune in next week as we explore traumatic brain injury and step families. I'm Mary Crocker Cook. Good night.